So for the course of today, you have the part with streams. This meaning that you will have the management of files and how you can read, how you can output, as well as maybe you do have some exceptions. So meaning that maybe the file where you want to write or to read from doesn't exist, as well as you can have some input-output exceptions and many others. Let's recap, because I'm sure that you may forget. So last time we stopped this example where you also have the case of abstract classes, as well as you have these two classes that will extend the abstract class. So here it was when having a client. You have a client who lives at a certain address, meaning that you will have such an arrow. Now, when I have something like this with this arrow, it means that I will have an object of type address inside client. So this is where I declare object address. Okay, A over here. And it's just one. As you can see here, you put the multiplicity. Here you have just one instance, and this is why we declare it in this way. While for account, as a client, you can have multiple accounts, and this is when you store it inside an array list. Okay, or a simple array, so it depends. Now, when I want to write it, so you will have it as a list. List is abstract and you cannot initialize to have a list equal to a new list. So you will have a list of type account, because inside your array of accounts, you will have several objects of type account. Okay, let's say account. Okay, now you have several accounts, which will be equal to what? As for classes, you have the keyword with new, and then you will have an array. So you cannot have a list of lists because this one is abstract, and you will have an array list. Or you can have it as an array with a predefined number of elements. So you have an array list, and this one you can leave it empty because it's an object of the same type of account. And you put it like this. So in fact, you call the constructor to create a new array list, a default one. So this is what it means. Okay, and this is the fact that of this relationship you have this part. While this also exists where? Inside client. So when you have something with the arrows, it means that in fact client has an instance of type address A, this one, because of this connection being one instance, and having the star, it means that I will have several accounts inside my collection of accounts. And then you see that having one account, this is the one, the generic one, and you can have two types of accounts. So you can have a debit account, while you can also have a credit account. You can also see that this method, so when you want to deposit, in fact, you add some amount. Okay. While with the withdraw, you have other conditions, whether you have a debit card or a credit card. So the debit card is, for example, you receive a salary and you can take out money as long as the sum of the money that you have for your account is greater or equal than the one that you want to subtract. Okay, and here for the credit account, so you take it, you buy it, so you want to withdraw. And this means that you should also check your maximum credits. So according to the amount that you did take out, thanks to the bank, you shouldn't exceed this maximum credit. And this means that you also need to define these methods. Now, before entering it, you see that you have this identifier with minus, you have a plus. So this minus means that it is private, while when you have it with plus, this is public. And how do you write it? Well, always, as a rule, you've got the classes that start with uppercase, while all the variables, so they start with lowercase, or you can write it as camel case. So camel case is in fact here. You start with the lower letter, and then you have an uppercase letter. So it is like a camel going up and down. Okay. So this camel, this is the part with camel case. This is how you name it. Let's see. So always the class name starts with uppercase. Okay. Here. This is with uppercase. And when you have all these attributes of a class, you start with camel case. Also, the functions obey the same rule. You also have them with camel case. So it's the same thing. Now, when I have my objects, how do I read it? This is your accessibility. Then you have your attribute name. And then you have the type. So in fact, let's say for this CNP, because I have some space here, this you would write it as what? First of all, you have your accessibility. So it will be private. Then after having the accessibility, I need to mention which is the type. Well, the type is always placed here at the end. So you have it string, whether it's local date, okay, and again string. So it means that I have private, then I have it as a string. Right, int is with uppercase, while int is with lowercase, and you have it as being CNP. So it's a personal numerical number, or SSN, Social Security number in US. And this is CNP, so it's code numeric personalized, like personal numerical code. Like this. All right. Also, the same is for your functions. So how do I also read it? Again, it's accessibility, then it's the return type. You have your function name and what you receive as an input parameter. Now, what does it mean when you have a void function? So when you have something with void, it means that you don't return anything. So no return. No return. You just display, you just compute something, and you can store it inside an account. Maybe you save it inside a file, so you don't need to write anything. Then when I want to remove something, for example, I want to remove an IBAN according to its code. And why do I have this IBAN as being of type string? Well, it's exactly the same parameter for which I search. So it's also an IBAN of type string. It is like when I want to take out, so to withdraw some money from my account, which is the type of that amount. Well, the type is of type numeric, so it's integer. It is not a double. Let's say to take out some coins out of your ATM, you just have it as an integer. Okay, so here, what you would do, you want to remove an account, and what you want to say is whether or not it was found. So you have a true or false answer, and this is why you have it as Boolean. And now, how do I declare this one? Well, I write it as being what? I have this plus, so I start with a plus, and it is public. Okay, public. So after public, what do I have? I have my return type. It is public Boolean. I need to know what I return. Yep. Okay. Then you have your function name, which is this one, remove account. Just write, not to create any dots for you. Account. Yeah. Okay. And then I have my parameters. My parameter. So in fact, string appears in front of my variable name. IBAN. Okay. Then you have the curly braces. So always you put these parameters between round braces, and then you have your curly braces. And the square braces appear when you have an array. So instead of this accounts, write something like this. I have account of accounts. Okay, and then so you have it as squared, and you have it as being a new account. Account of 5, let's say. But here you have a maximum dimension, and you shouldn't exceed it. You should check it. So it's better to use collections like array list. So here you need to check you have all your conditions, whether you do have enough space, and you start counting. So always you start counting from position 0. So here you can assign from 0 up to 4. So these are the positions that you can call. So round braces are for these methods. You have curly braces inside, and the square ones are for your array. Okay. And in fact, the string is what? The string is an array of chars. Okay. So here I see that my account is of 2 types. And how do I declare it? You can have it as a public abstract class. We have a keyword for it, class. So all of them, they are classes. Whether it's client, whether it's address, whether it's debit card, they are your classes. And why do you use your classes? Because you see it as a problem universe, and they exist independently. An address is characterized by a city, number, and street. Then a client, you cannot say that a client is characterized by city, number, street. No, he just lives at a certain address, and maybe it's his home address, maybe he has another address where he simply stays and it's a rented house. Okay, while when you have an account, you cannot say that the client is an account. No, you just have a reference to it and you can simply use it. Okay, so it's in public abstract class, then I have account. Okay. And what I do here is when I define a class, I put a curly braces. So I don't put any round braces here, nothing. It just appears in this way. You have a public abstract class. Then you have these two. You have a private string IBAN, private int amount. And what you need to do is that you also define a constructor. What is a constructor? Well, you have public as accessibility. Then you have the class name. So if the class name is account, my file is mandatory to be account.java. Yeah. Okay. And what you will have here will be what? The compiler, which will take the code, it analyzes it, and it will simply transform your file into a dot class. So it will be again an account dot class. This is at compile time. And this is the same. So if you know in C, C++, if you did use it, you have your code in C, then you have you compile, you obtain your object code, and then you simply run that one. The file that and you simply run. Now for the constructor, I have public. Then I have the name of the class, which is my account. And for my account, you have two possibilities. So for this account, you can put the default constructor. The default constructor is the empty one. Okay, like this, round braces, curly braces. And this is called the default constructor. I'm going to write it here. Default constructor. Okay, also, I define the other two. So it will be with public. And then I have a count of what? I have my two parameters. Okay. Which I need to define here. So it will be a private string IBAN. Okay, this is exactly what I did last time, but just okay, this is a string IBAN. Okay. As well as what do you have? You should also define your amount. So you also have this private int amount. Okay, private int, and I have my amount. Okay. And how do I write my own constructor here? I will have a public account based on what? Based on string of IBAN. So it is not mandatory to type in the same way. I can have it with lowercase IBAN, tuck, comma. I have int amount. Int AM, let's say. And this means that you do what over here? You will have this dot IBAN with everything in uppercase. It's exactly how you did define it as an attribute of the class. Okay, to be equal to your IBAN that you provide as an input variable. Okay, it's equal to my IBAN from here. So always your input variable, it will appear over here. So you initialize the attribute of your class with what you provide as your input. Then you will have this dot amount. Okay. So it's exactly the attribute of your class, how it is defined here, as being equal to AM. Okay. What do you do in the case of this method, which is also overridden by your debit account, and credit account? So let me see. Yeah, it is over here. All right, here you will have the account codes. Let's see. You put it as what? It is accessible to all of the subtypes. So it's a public what? Abstract, Boolean, abstract, tuck, Boolean. Okay, withdraw. And I will show the code until that time, just to write for you to be clear. Of what? Of an int amount. And what do you put at the end of it? At the end of it, you have just the semicolon, because for the rest, when you have them as subtypes, you will have to extend. So this deposit, you simply write how it will be. So it will be a public void deposit, meaning that this dot amount plus equals this parameter that you provide. Okay. So just account. Yeah, this is the one. Check. Just to see it. Let's see, lab one card. Yeah. The amount withdraw. Oh. So let's just write this. So here you have a public void deposit with this dot amount plus equals this one. Now, when I will have the debit card and credit card, what I will write, it will be the public debit card extends withdraw. And then you have exactly how it behaves. And so it is exactly like here. I will extend the card, and then for your constructor, you need to call it with super. And what will the super do? Well, it will call exactly the constructor that was defined here. So meaning that this is the constructor which will be called with super. Just to paste it inside chat. So let's see. Again, taking it from the beginning. From where do you start coding? So always start coding from those classes which do not depend on the others. So you can start coding from address, as well as you can start coding from account. They are the isolated classes. Well, let's see. Here you will have an address. So it's a public class address. And my address is characterized by what? I have a city, a number, a street, and all of them have a minus. So I have this private string city, and then you have the private in number, as well as private string of street. And then what you have here is your constructor, meaning that this one is placed, as you can see, lamp with address. It's inside the Java file. Then you have string number street as being inside your constructor. If you have a get, when you have the get of street, you have the return, and what you need to return is exactly the same type as you have for street. So street was defined as being this one with a string, so you have a public string of get street. When you have the set, why do you have it as being void, the return type? This is because you don't return absolutely anything, you just set this the street as being equal to your input parameter. So if I put this S, this would be the street that I will receive. And the same is done for city as well as number. After that, you start coding your card. Okay. And here, what you can also do is you will see the part that you have the streaming. So when you have streaming, what you can do is to read and write from files. And you have here another type of class. This is an interface. And when you have an interface defined, like a public interface storable, you see here that you need to define your methods. So you will have a void store. And what can be? When I want to write inside the file, which is the type of exception that can be thrown? Well, maybe this file doesn't even exist. As well as when I read, also, I can have this input-output exception. And this is when you also need to import it from Java. Then you have the IO from input-output, and you have your both exceptions. And what will the car do? So you have the interface. The interface is exactly, you define the methods which will be implemented by different classes. So when you want to store and read, for example, an instance of card, you read and write inside a different file than you would do for your clients. And this is why you simply have it as an interface. And for your class, what you will do is to implement such interfaces. Okay, so you implement your interface. For example, you can even compare based on another object of the same type, as well as you can store it. Okay, and again, you have the recap with minus for private, plus is for public, and protected is the one when you can access it inside the class, as well as maybe you have some subclasses and you can use it inside them. Okay. So let's see. For the card, you define your IBAN and amount. They are private. Then you have your constructor, the one which you've seen. You can also have the toString. Whatever the class, you have the toString method, which you will override, meaning that you will say exactly what you want to return. So being inside the class of card, I want to return the attribute, which is my IBAN, as well as I have my amount. And also, why do I have this? This is placed in the current context of the class. I want to access these two variables which characterize an object of type lab1 card. But being abstract, you cannot say that lab1 card A equals new lab1 card. No, you need to say that it is either one of these two cases. Okay, and here you will have your withdraw method, which will be your public abstract void. Then you have withdraw according to a sum of money. You also have the get of IBAN, so you return it. You also have the set, so set is void, you don't return anything and you just set IBAN. As you can see, it's of a different color. You have the IBAN of your class with the one that you provide as an input variable. So you can see it over here. You can have, you see the shadow behind it, the background, and the same is for get amount, set amount. Now, what happens inside a debit card? Well, inside my debit card, what I need to do is to use the keyword with extends. And by having it with extends, I will have to create a new instance of my debit card, which does not depend on another parameter, but of IBAN and amount, which already exists. So you call it with super of IBAN and amount. And this one will call, in fact, the constructor inside card. So this constructor will be used. Then when I want to withdraw, you simply need to check which is your amount, whether your amount of the current object is greater than the sum that you want to withdraw. You have this S out, so I can do a control space and I can print it. So you can generate the system out print line, not to waste time writing it. So in fact, you call the system of your current app, then out is for the output, and then you have this print and ln because you want to print on a single line and not to add the backslash of n to add a new line at the end. So in fact, you will say that the operation was executed successfully, as well as which will be the new amount for a debit card. So a debit card is like you've got your employer, and the employer at a certain date of the month, you will have the salary added exactly within your account. And now when I want to buy something, it means that I need to update the amount, and it means that the old sum will be updated and you need to subtract the sum that you want to pay. Or if not, if the sum exceeds the amount of money of which you dispose, you will simply have a warning saying that you don't have enough funding. All right. And then you have the store. So what you will see in the current course is when you have these streams and as well as the errors. So as you can see here, I want to store inside a certain file, a certain object. So what I can do is I need to use this file output stream, which belongs to Java IO again. So if I comment it, it will be Java IO, and it will simply want to import it. As you can see, I have import class. And then you would import one by one, and I simply don't want to do this. It's better just to have java.io, and then you have all together everything. Then what I can do over here is to write inside the file, but how? If I use the first option, I overwrite what already exists. If I add this append true, it means that everything will be added at the end of the file. So you have the file output stream. You need to know where you want to write. Then you see it as a pipeline in Linux. I have a stream writer, so I will prepare to write, but where? I prepare to write exactly in the file that I did provide before. So I have a reference to that file. It's like a pointer, and I will have my output file. And then what I need to do is exactly to write inside the file. Okay, so this is like storing inside your memory. Okay, you have disk after disk. Then you will prepare to write, but you need to know exactly which of your disk will be written. Okay, meaning that you have your print writer according to your output stream, also related to what? Related to the file where you want to write. And you will write what? Exactly, you will call the toString method of what? You will call the toString method, in fact, of card. Okay, because you want your IBAN and amount. So this is what you will add inside your file. Okay. Then what you can also do is to read from a file. And this means that you can have an input-output exception. And which would be it? As you can see, it's again the file not found exception. So what I do is that I want to read. So first in my file input stream, as for output is the same. So you have the file, then is the operation that you want to do. When I want to store, it means that I have output, so I need to write somewhere, and this is why I have output stream writer, print writer, and now I read from a file. So in fact, I have a file input stream. It's not associated to any file, and now I say like this. Inside it, I want to read from a certain file. Whether this file does not exist, it will trigger an error, and this one will be catched by the file that not found exception. So it was caught by this one. Then I have my input stream reader. Here it was what? It was the output. Then you have again the word stream, and then which is the operation that you do. Here you read, here you write. So this is why you have output, then you have the stream and writer, while here you have your input stream and reader. Based on what? Again, it's based on the file that I want to process, so it will be linked to the file from which I want to read, while here it's where I want to write. Also, you have this append true when you want to add the content at the end of your file, so not to override it like in the case of this line which was commented. But here I just want to read, so I don't care about any other option, I just read the whole content. What I do over here is, in fact, I have a buffered reader, so I read paragraph by paragraph and I simply display it. While here I have what? I have a print writer. So in fact, I can display and write inside the file each and every content, but at the end you need to close the file such that everything gets persisted. So it gets saved inside your file. Such that inside your buffered reader, you link it to your input file and to your input stream reader. And now you will get line by line. So you will read until you get the null reference, until you get to the end of your file. And what you will do is to simply display like paragraph by paragraph using the system out print line, so line by line. And in the end, whether you have a file output exception, you will have to display the print trace at the end based on what happened. Also, what you can do, you see here that you have for a card, you have this comparable. So you can compare two objects of the same type, which is this lab1 card. And what it will do, in fact, you see that you need to implement it here. So in fact, which is the operation? Is it overload or overriding? So override, it's when, according to the definition of a function, like here I have this read, which is inside this interface of storable, I will have to implement it. Whether I implement it and I don't add any other attributes, it means that I do the override process. If I simply add more and more parameters here, I would overload this function. And override, it's again, I have this method and I can even change the return type, and it's the override process of that function. Now, let's see how do I do it. So in fact, when you have these implements of comparable, what you need to do is to override the compare to function. The compare to according to what? Well, who implements it? It is exactly my lab1 card, which can compare two objects of this type. So it will be according to it. Now, how can I compare? Where it's according to an index, whether it's before, equal, or after. And what does it mean as a position? It means that -1 means that it is before it. Then equal is when you have 0, so it's exactly the same index. Then you have after, which means that you have an index 1, so it comes afterwards. And how do I do it? First of all, I want to check whether the current instance of the class, such that the current object this, is equal to the one that I provide. And whether they refer to the same address space, then I say that they are equal to 0. So it is like return 0, meaning that I return exactly this final int. So final means that for a variable, you cannot change its value. So it remains the same no matter what, and you cannot modify it. So if I write here equal to 1, it will simply say that this one is final. You cannot assign. Okay, so whether you shouldn't make it final. So you cannot change the value for it. Then whether they are not the same objects, what would you have to compare is exactly the IBAN. So you will have the super. And why do you have super with get IBAN? Well, my IBAN is in fact the attribute of the class card as well as is amount. So you have super, you get the IBAN, and then you compare to what? You compare the IBAN of the current object with the one that you provide over here as a parameter. And okay, so you compare them, and whether the result is different than what? Than 0, then you would receive, you would simply trigger whether, so which would be this answer, whether it's -1, whether it's 1, according to this comparison. Now, maybe my IBANs are the same, but the amounts are not. So it means that here you will have the super.get amount. Then you compare it with the amount of the other object. And here you will say that whether the current amount of your object is less, you will have the return before. Whether it is greater, you need to return after. And if not, you have just one option, which means that they are equal. And the same thing you do for credit card. So credit card will extend again lab1 card, while you also have the attribute of your class, which is exactly this max credit. So you have a private int max credit. You have your constructor, again with super. And why is it with super? So you extend lab1 card. These two, IBAN and amount, they are attributes of your class card. So this is why you call exactly the constructor of the abstract class. It's super, as well as you set your maximum credit. When I want to store and to read from the file, in fact, what I need to do is to copy paste again the code that I have over here. So again, as a recap, when I want to store, I have what? I have file. Then what do? I do an output operation according to a string. Why do I have it as a string? Because I have a sequence of bits, so 0 and 1s that are stored somewhere, according to a file. And what I can do is to override the content. So compared to debit card, which was simply adding at the end by having a pen through, I will override the content over here. Then I have what? I will have the writer according to the output stream. So you have file output stream, then you take these two words. So output stream will be concatenated with writer. What I do is to write where inside the file that I did define previously. So I have a reference to it. And now, according to this last word with writer, what do I do is to print inside it. So I have a print writer according to my output stream of bits. And I will write, for example, for the current object, again, calling the toString. Okay, this one will call what? It will, in fact, not use the toString of my card because I also have another attribute, which is max card. So I need to override it again, meaning that here I need to override it and to say that I'm inside credit card. I have a max credit as well as maybe I want to return IBAN. So IBAN is defined as an attribute inside card, and I need to call it with super.getIBAN. Now, again, you need to close at the end with pw.close or else it won't get written. So after having your print writer, you need to close this reference, okay, because you can write and write some more. So this is like when you have a USB stick, and at the end you simply need to remove it safely. So this is the same, you need to close the process at the end. Also, you have the read. Again, what do? I have a file and I use what? I use an input stream. First thing, I have no reference because here you can have an error that is thrown. So maybe the file does not exist, as well as this one is triggered also by itself by doing the input and output. So basically, according to the file input stream, I need to say where do I write it. So it will be the info.txt. Then I will use an input stream reader. So I read the stream one by one. I read what? I read a series of bits one by one. And then I will have what? The buffered reader. So in fact, this one with buffered, you see it as having a bunch of characters that you read and then you can display. So it means that until you reach the null reference at the end of your file, you can display paragraph by paragraph what you did find. So in fact, each and every paragraph will have an offset. Based on that offset, I can display. As well as maybe the file does not exist. So I will simply say that you have a file not found. This is like for web programming, you have that 404 error, meaning that it couldn't find a certain resource. When I want to compare, it's again based on before, equal, or after, according to the reference, and whether the current instance of the class is exactly the one that I provide, then it means that they are the same objects. If not, I need to continue and compare the IBAN. So whether the IBAN is different than equal, then I return exactly which would be the value according to this comparison. And whether even the IBANs are equal, then I compare the amount. So whether the amount of your current object is less than the one of the object that you provide as an input, then you have before. Whether it is greater than it's after, if not, it's equal. And now for the withdraw. I have a credit card. So the credit card means that I will have a maximum credit. Let's say that you have a house, you want to buy some furniture, and as you buy and buy, you would add inside your amount how much you owe the bank. And by taking money, so while you take money, it means that you shouldn't exceed the maximum credit. So in fact, for your current amount, you want to check whether if I want to buy again some product of some sum, I shouldn't exceed the maximum credit for which I did sign the contract. And whether it's not exceeded, then your amount that you owe the bank should be simply updated, meaning that the new amount is the old amount, this that get amount, plus sum. and you need to set it such that the function set exists inside card, because this is the place where you did define your IBAN. So this is the function which will be called. If not, so this is the case when everything is successfully performed. If get amount plus sum exceeds your maximum credit, then you should say that you did exceed the maximum threshold of some amount. Okay. And this is what you need to do, as well as you will define each one of them. Okay, so here you've seen this reference. This is exactly what I did to draw over here. You have inside client a reference for address. So this is when you define it as here. Then you will have a list of cards. So this is, as I wrote here, you have a list of accounts as being a new array list. You cannot have a list of lists, so it is already abstract, as you can see, and it will say that it cannot assign it. So list is abstract. Okay. Then you can also define it as an inner class. So as you can see, but when you have an inner class, you cannot put public in front. Whenever you have public class, this means that you're inside a file called lab1.client. When you define another class inside it, this one will be static. Okay. So I cannot have the public in front. Public means the same method as for your class. And this one will have int number. I have a string city, an address, and you have your constructor as well as your getters, setters. Now what I need to do, maybe I also want to store my clients, meaning that I need to implement storable and comparable both according to my client. So again, I have the store according to your output stream, as well as I will read, and I will read exactly from a certain file, like info.txt. If I compare, it's according to, let's say, my IBAN, as well as how many cards I've got. So whenever you have this one, you see that for your array list, if you want to get the dimension, this one is called with size. When you have a value of type string, let's say name, you have it with dot length. And maybe you have a simple array like this one, and you call it again accounts dot length without any round braces. Okay, then you can also remove it according to an IBAN. What does it mean? Well, you see here that you also need to return what? You need to return an element, let's say Boolean, or maybe you want to return exactly the object. So firstly, the object does not exist, it's null. Then you go through each and every card instance from cards, as well as you will compare the IBAN whether or not is the same one. And here you have the for, as you can see. You put the same object type as the ones that you store inside your array list. So here inside my array list, I have objects of type lab1 card. And this is why I have my for lab1 card, and I parse what? I parse exactly this collection named cards. And for it, I need to do what? I compare my IBAN, but keep in mind that my IBAN is a string and it can have uppercase, lowercase, letters. So you compare it with this equals ignore case according to my IBAN. And whether they are equal, then C equals CC, as well as what I need to do is to remove it. Then what I can return is exactly the object which I did find, or if not, it will be null. So here I define for my client an address. Then I have a debit card according to an IBAN and an amount. I can have another debit card and a credit card. Also, I can have two clients, these two. I have a name, I have their birthday, their personal numerical number, CNP, and also an address where they live. Such that I can also set the address by using the constructor. And for each and every client, so client 1 will have two cards, debit card DC, this one, as well as a credit card, which is this one with CC. what I can do is to also visualize his name, and I can withdraw a sum of money like 2,000. So here I see that the name of my client is this Popescu. Then I want to withdraw, but I use a debit card of 1,000. But I want to withdraw 2,000. So this is much greater than the amount of which I dispose, and this is why it will say not enough funding. What I can do is to also parse all the cards that I have for my client C. So I call it with C cards, and I can go through all of them, as well as I can display the IBAN. So I see these two, and they are exactly these two accounts that you have here. And then what I can do is to remove a card. So maybe I want this one to be removed. And what I will do, it will simply have this output saying that it was successfully removed. And if I add here, let's say a 1, this one does not exist. Okay, so it will run it. Okay. So this is the case when the same objects will be displayed. So this will be a null reference. Okay, so you can simply have the get. Okay, so when you want to remove, you can have an if. Let's see, remove card, returns a card. Yeah, you return. So whether if dot this one equals null, okay, you will have the cout card does not exist. Okay. So let's run it again. Okay. And this is when it will say that it doesn't exist at all. Okay, as you can see over here. But let's return to how it was. So here you just parse them again to visualize which is the collection that remain. I can run it again from here to get evaluated. And as you can see, it will say that the car was successfully removed. Then you will see that out of the list that I had, it doesn't exist any longer. Okay, and I see that I have just one of them. And for it, what I can do is to also store it inside a file. So I want my debit card to be stored inside the file info.txt. And what I will see is, in fact, my debit card. So what I can do is, okay, I save it. It was with a pen through. Okay, so I run it again. Okay, and as you can see, I have my debit card simply saved over here. All right. Also, I want to read what I do have, and when it will read, it will display exactly this amount, so this line that exists. Then what I can do is also to compare two objects. I want to compare two objects of type card. I have C and C2. So I have this credit card with the other one, okay, this C2. And this is the case when it will compare based on two of them. So this is the one, C and C2. So you will have exactly the value as being greater. So you will have this 1 and -1 according to their position. Okay, so you compare my C, which is this client, you have this C compared to client 2. So I have C, C2, and I compare both of them. But in this case, it will compare according to the cards that they have. Okay. As well as what you can do is to also compare based on two objects of type card. So I have my DC and DC2. And this means that I have my two debit cards. And it will simply compare the IBAN. Okay, with this -1 as being this first one. as it comes before the second one. Okay. And this is how you compare your records. So let's have here a small break and then we continue, like a 5 minutes break. Something